Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Just wanted to give you a little disclaimer that some of the topics that we discussed today are on the sensitive side of things. We wanted to give you that heads up and just let you know, just in case you had little kids in the car with you or around while you were listening to this. We love you. We thank you so much for your support, and let's get into today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Welcome to another episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. I'm going to be honest with you. I woke up this morning and I don't know where my energy was. It just did not, my batteries did not recharge
Chinese
last
restaurant.
night. Dude, that's what I think it is. So I'm kind of dealing
Chinese
with like some
this week for lunch.
Yeah, yesterday we had all you can eat Chinese food buffet with our Lunch Munch crew here at Southridge Church. And for those of you who don't know, it's our 50 and over crowd, and it's they're just a lively bunch, and it's always a great time every single time that we get to go out and hang out with them and just get to know each other, share life stories, what can we learn from them. But yeah, I think I may have had something a little funky yesterday.
I think we all came back and were ready to crash after that yesterday.
Well, I felt fine.
I literally, when I got home, I did not want to do anything.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was walking through I just
like
couldn't move. It was like a zombie. I was like, I can't move.
Keep that microphone closer to you.
I know. I'm sorry. I always forget.
It's all right. We just want to be able to hear you because you've got good stuff to say. So,
pretty loud too.
But yeah. And so I woke up this morning, and typically, whenever you sleep, you want to wake up, maybe it takes a couple minutes just to shake off the cobwebs or anything. That didn't happen this morning. I still have them. I felt like Frodo Baggins in Lord of the Rings whenever he meets that big giant spider.
Wait a minute.
He's loaded up with spider web.
Okay, first of all, you can't judge me with what I'm about to ask you.
Okay.
Because I've not seen. Is that who that is?
No, that's Gollum.
Okay, so this morning, I'm showing Jared a picture. So this morning, someone sent me this, and it says, what kids directors, when someone asks why they haven't been seen in service in the last month, and it's a picture of, who is it?
Gollum.
And he looks real tore up.
Or like Smeagol. He's names.
Looking real rough. And I was like, man, I feel that. That's what I look like most Sundays after service.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn the camera. You probably can't see it, but this is it right here.
Yeah.
I saw that this morning though when someone sent it, and I was like, oh, I feel seen.
I feel understood. Yeah, but I just. And then we had Bible study this morning, which was good. It's always good to see, just the guys, and we just hang out and we just talk and discuss Bible and biblical stuff. And but man, oh man, I don't know what it is like. And I haven't been drinking caffeine, so I haven't done any soda, I haven't done any coffee. I'm drinking tea, but this is caffeine-free tea. And I know probably a lot of people are going to sit there and go, like, what? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. Why would you subject yourself to that? Well, I'll give you a little insight in how my brain works, right? So, obviously, if you know a little bit about me in my past, like I have an addictive personality, right? I find things that I am just drawn to, and then I just latch onto them. And so I found myself a couple years ago, I went to go visit my brother whenever he was living and working out of Los Angeles, and I was drinking coffee just as much as they were,
right.
which is obviously copious amounts. Like it was, I think I drank 24 cups of coffee in a day.
In a day?
In a day.
I don't drink coffee though, so.
I almost died.
That is crazy.
Yeah. I
Holy
felt like I
smokes.
was just knocking
Man.
on death's door. It was terrible. And so, so I went without caffeine for a little bit there, but then I started getting back into it. I was like, sodas, a cup of coffee here and there. But I find that if it's something that I begin to rely on more and more and
Right.
more, I'm starting to go down this trend of let's do this. So, and I also got tired of like having to fight headaches in the mornings.
Mm-hmm.
So like the caffeine
Makes a
withdrawal.
big difference.
And so what do? You say, oh, I need some caffeine. It'll take away this headache. And so I said, I don't want to rely on anything for me to get through the day.
Yeah.
Except
There's
for
nothing
Jesus.
wrong with that.
I'm trying to.
I made a switch this morning, which for me is a big deal. This is they don't. So I stop at 7-Eleven every morning, and I normally will get Dr. Pepper because that's my favorite. Like,
Yeah.
if I could have an IV of Dr. Pepper 24/7, I would. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
But this is Diet Dr. Pepper today, which is a big deal
Yeah.
because they don't have like the Dr. Pepper Zero and fountain drinks down there. Because I was
Yeah.
trying to make a good choice and not just drink the Dr. Pepper. So it was either Coke Zero or Diet Dr. Pepper, and I was like, you know what? We're just gonna take one for the team and drink Diet Dr. Pepper today. And this is we're limiting today, and we're not gonna have the real stuff.
That's all right. Luke's on like the Dr. Pepper and cream soda kick.
I haven't
right
had
now.
that, but I've heard it's good.
It
I have
is.
had the strawberry one, like the one that they put it was like the Dr. Pepper strawberry.
Yeah.
Didn't like that.
Yeah.
Didn't like that at all. It had a funny aftertaste to it though. Like it was,
Oh, yeah.
it was, I don't know. I didn't like that, but I haven't had that. I do like the Dr. Pepper cherry. Like they've had, because the one
yeah,
was
I've
like a
seen that
Dr.
one.
Pepper strawberries and cream.
Yeah.
That's the one I didn't like. But the Dr. Pepper cherry is really good. It just
Yeah.
adds, I mean, there's already cherry in Dr. Pepper anyways. It just
Yeah.
adds a little bit more to it. We went to a conference a couple weeks ago in Nashville. And when we were there, there's this, I guess the owner, or not the owners, but like the founders of this conference, the Kids Matter conference that we went to, their daughter started a business called Lucy's Car Wash. And it is it's like a soda shop type thing, and burgers and fries and all this stuff. Well, when they come
But the name of it is the car
called
wash?
Lucy's Car Wash and something, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like Lucy's Car Wash. So they have an actual building, and it's in Indiana somewhere. I can't remember where, but it's somewhere in Indiana. And so I don't know if like the building is an old, I don't know. I have no idea. I just know that when they come to this conference, they always bring the drinks. So they do all these like specialty drinks. And there was
Yeah.
one that when we were there called the Kidmin, which was Dr. Pepper with cream and cherry and a little bit of, I can't remember what it was, but it was something else that was sweet. And it was like a cream soda. It was so good. And so I bet that Dr. Pepper cream that he's drinking is good.
Yeah.
Because I would venture to say it tasted a lot like that Kidman. And I got one like every day we were at the conference.
Anytime I talk to Erica and I'm like, hey, let's put together a list of things that we need to get from Kroger or something like that. The kid comes out of the woodwork. He could be upstairs and he's like,
I love it.
hey, I really would love for you guys to get me a Dr. Pepper cream soda.
I'm going to have to
and-
try it.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to, because that was one of my favorite things that we had that whole week at that conference.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's lunchtime and everybody's standing in line. They're like, what are you getting? I'm like, the Kidman, duh, it's Dr. Pepper. And who knows what else in it. All I heard was Dr. Pepper. So
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
see.
to get into our topic today, you and I were discussing 2 weeks ago about what we were going to talk today. And you presented something to me that I had never heard of before in my life.
yes.
Never have. And I probably would have never been on my radar, not unless it was something that like I personally came in contact with, but anybody that serves in any kind of ministry should have an understanding of what this is. Because the deep dive that we go into and trying to learn and go about gathering information for stuff it's super intriguing, and I found that it's super beneficial.
Yes.
And so the topic that you brought to my attention is something called trauma-informed children's ministry.
Yeah.
What is trauma-informed children's ministry?
Okay. Well, first off, let me take a step back because I probably couldn't have told you this. But I think that for me, as having the background that I do have in social work, and now, I've been in social work now for almost 10 years. I've done social work in all kinds of different aspects. I've worked with at-risk youth for way longer than that. And just seeing the things that people go through, we have to understand, let me preface, this is my definition of trauma-informed kids ministry. This is not a legit definition. And it's not, I don't even know if it's a definition, but it's what I see. And what we have to understand is that we live in a world today that people have all kinds of baggage that they bring to the table.
Yes.
And we cannot sit back and assume that the kids and the families that we minister to week after week do not have those things.
Yep.
We cannot assume that the kids that walk through our doors each week have not experienced physical abuse. We cannot assume that the kids that walk through our doors, or the families that walk through our doors, have never experienced domestic violence or sexual abuse or have gone without food. We can't assume that.
Yeah, even extreme bullying.
No.
I mean, you think of like everything,
even loss.
Any
Like
kind of case.
We have kids here, and we just had a training on Sunday with our volunteers, and I told them, I said, this morning, this was this past Sunday, sitting in our kids ministry, we have children who every week, these kids are sitting in our kids min every single week. Just because they come to church doesn't mean that everything is fine.
Yeah.
And I'm very open with the kids that I work with, and it could be because of my background in social work, but I always say, like, life is not rainbows and butterflies. Like, the Bible tells us, in this world you will have trouble. Like, we will have things that happen. Like, we're not guaranteed to have this rainbow butterfly life. But there are things that are tough. There are things that are hard. And our goal is to minister to those kids and to let them know that they are loved and they're seen and they're known. And it's okay to have some baggage that comes along with that, because nobody's life is squeaky clean all the time.
Yeah.
But like, we have kids whose parents have passed away. We have kids who have been adopted. We have kids who have experienced extreme bullying. We have kids that have extreme, and I'm not even kidding you, like extreme mental health at 7, 8, 9 years old. Like, we witnessed it this summer at church camp.
Yeah.
I've witnessed it here in this building a couple times with kids too. I mean, I've had conversations with kids in this building who have told me that they just wish they thought that life would be better if they were dead at 8 and 9 years old. And so those are the things that's what we talk about when we talk about, like, kind of that trauma informed care. It's not just a matter of like caring for those that have had traumatic experiences. It's almost to a point of being empathetic and letting people know that it's okay to be your true and honest self. It's okay to talk to people. It's okay to have those things happen in your life. I love, she's actually sitting in here, but I'm going to pick on Cheryl for a second. But one of the things I love about Cheryl is that, like, she has been so open and honest with her story. And there are people that can't be that way. Like, there are people that are so closed off that they don't want people to know their story. They don't want people to know that they've experienced certain things or whatever the case may be. But what we find out is that these childhood traumas that happen from a child from the birth of 0 to 18, if they're not addressed before the age of 18, turn into they're no longer childhood traumas.
Yeah.
They are adult trauma, and adult trauma that has been stacked upon, stacked upon, stacked upon, stacked upon, stacked upon. And so our goal is to make sure that we are working with the kids within our ministry and letting them know that it's okay. Like, it's okay to have trauma. It's okay to have things happen, because we're not going to love you any less. We're not going to push you away. We're not going to send you away. But we're here to love you, and we're here to care for you. And we're here to do that to the utmost of our abilities and the ability that God gives us.
Yeah. So why do we need to begin to understand trauma? Why do we need to begin to understand this side of ministry? Why is it something that is so important And I'm not trying to come across as like
Yeah,
skeptical or anything like that, because I'm trying to put myself in the seat of someone
Yeah.
who may be like completely misinformed.
Yeah.
So where do we begin to understand
So-
this? Why is it important?
Yeah, so I'm going to read really quick. So SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, it actually says that trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and their physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So a traumatic event is going to have long-lasting impact on those four things: your social, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being.
Yeah.
And so when people ask, why does trauma matter? Why do those things matter? That's it right there. Because if it's not taken care of, it leads to longer issues.
Yeah.
There's a study that was done that I had sent to Jared that is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And this was done back in the 90s with Kaiser Permanente. And what they did is they went through a list of 10 different, at that time, adverse childhood experiences. And what they did is when they went through these, they did this study and they found that people that had like a ACEs score is what they call it, of 4 or more, were like 10 times more likely to develop substance use disorder or have a coronary issue. There are people that, like well-known people, like Oprah Winfrey has a ACE score of 10. That's the highest ACE score that you can get. But the importance is not just about the ACEs, it's about the resiliency, and it's about the protective factors that you put into it.
Yeah.
Because all of us have probably had an ACE score of something. I mean, even ministry. I mean, all of us in this room right now have an ACE score of something. But we're able to we're resilient. We have resiliency. We have protective factors. And now you're putting those protective factors in your families. And a lot of times kids don't have that. And so if we can be a protective factor, if the church can be a protective factor for kids, then let's take advantage of it. Let's do it. Let's make this a place where kids can come and be their true, authentic selves, no matter what that looks like. And letting them have a safe place where they can share openly and they can be who God has created them to be, despite the fact that they've had some trauma in their life. And knowing that we can be one of those positive areas, those positive influences in their life, can go a long way.
Yeah. I think I know that Cheryl, and I can't speak for her, I know that she's been open about her story. And I've been open about some issues that I've dealt with in the past with church hurt and substance abuse. And I find that I think a lot of the times that whenever you get to hear the small bits of it in church, whenever I'm leading worship, I like to talk about like what God has brought me through. Mm-hmm. But like whenever I'm having more personal conversations, I find that it helps me cope with the things that I've dealt with, the things that I've gone through. And so and just be able to process something that's very negative into something that's positive. It's always in the forefront of my mind to be praying for individuals that have experienced church hurt, praying for the people that are coming out of addiction. Like my heart just hurts for those ladies in Recovery Point, but I'm so excited to see like where they're coming from. And it's super, and like you said, it's super important for someone to be able to allowed to be themselves, but also have a safe space where they can talk to someone about it, because it begins to help with that healing process. It begins to help with just processing just something that is just so traumatic, you know, for lack of a better word.
When I went to that conference, one of the breakouts that I attended was from I can't think of who the guy is that did it. Brian somebody, I can't remember. But he does here it is. His name is Brian Dollar, and he is with
his last name's Dollar.
Dollar, I know, right? But he was doing one of the lessons on death and tragedy with kids. And then I also got to attend a session on, actually there's a whole, I don't even know it, but I don't even know, can't remember who does it. Maybe the Reach Institute. But they have a whole curriculum for volunteers called Trauma Informed Kids Ministry.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because this has actually been something that's been on my mind since I started here. And again, it could be just because of my background in social work, but we see it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time, and it's less about the event and more about the things that have happened that cause those long lasting impacts on people. And so it's something that we're seeing more and more of. We're going to continue to see more and more of. We just came through a whole pandemic. That's trauma for kids. Like that's a traumatic experience that our kids have experienced that, some of us haven't, until we're in our 30s, haven't even experienced that.
Yeah.
And so these are things that they are going through, and I mean, it's tough. It's hard.
Now, obviously I don't want to share names or anything like that. Some of the instances that have happened in kids ministry, specifically with us here at Southridge Church, do we want to try to talk about some of those things and maybe highlight or maybe show a path that you have addressed in working with parents and what does that look like?
I think so I've had how do I say this? So I think when we think when we think of trauma, we have to understand that trauma can be different things for different people.
Yes.
So you and I could sit in here right now and something could happen and we could experience it very differently.
Yes.
And so we have to understand that just because it didn't happen to me and it didn't affect me in the same way that it affected you doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so
if a deer came through the front door right now,
yes,
I would look at it as meat. You would look at it.
I would probably
as,
be like, what the heck is happening right now?
I will punch every deer in the face the next time I see a deer.
Yes, that's very accurate. That is very accurate. But we have to, so that's the first thing I would say in that regard.
Yeah.
But I have talked to parents in the last two years who have had children who, I actually had one parent tell me, she was like, my kid has these big emotions and I don't know how to deal with it. He's 6 and he has these big emotions and I don't know how to deal with it. How do I deal with these? And so it's a matter of figuring those things out. We've had parents who have reached out and talked about how their kid has passed or their grandparent has passed away, and a kid has questions about why grandma died or why grandpa died.
Yeah.
What does that look like for a 5-year-old? How do you explain that to a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old? So those things are traumatic for them. We've had, I'm not kidding you, probably it's been almost 2 years. Well, it's been about a year and a half ago. I sat back in the E-Zone one night, and there was a child who had told me that they would like to kill themselves. They were done. And when I went to say something to them, and I stopped, and I thought, I'm not fighting with this right now because I don't want to draw attention to what just took place. And so I didn't, and I let it be. And they continued to say things, continued to make comments. And a little later, we were sitting in a circle, and it was just me and this child that were closer in proximity. And they were coloring, and I was coloring. And I looked over, and I was like, you did a really good job. Thanks. Can you draw this? I don't know. Can you draw this? Maybe. And so we just started dialoguing back and forth.
Yeah.
And I looked at the child, and I said, so I have a question for you. I said, remember earlier when you said that you think that everything would be better if you would kill yourself? Do you really mean that? No, I was just mad. Okay, well, why do you say things like that when you're mad? Can you tell me? Can you explain to me why that's where you go? And the kid told me, they said, sometimes I just get really, really mad, and that's just the first thing that comes to my head, but I don't really want to do it. And that's the reality of some of our kids at 9 years old, that's what they're experiencing. I mean, we experienced something at camp this summer that for an 8-year-old, I think he's 8, I think that was an 8-year-old, that as a social worker who's been practicing social work for 10 years, I had not had to deal. I mean, I've dealt with severe mental health crises, but not in an 8-year-old like that.
Yeah.
Like, it was crazy. But I was very thankful that I had the training that I had in order to handle the situation at hand, because there were times where we had to step in because this child wanted to harm themselves, and this child wanted to harm other people. And so we had to step in and we had to do what was best. We had to keep him safe, but we also had to keep everyone else safe too. And so those things are few and I can't say that those things don't happen, because we can't, like, it's like when we did our, when we did with security, it's like when security did our training with us or whatever, like a little over a year and a half ago, they said something along the lines of like, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. Like, unfortunately, it is a matter of when sometimes, even with the mental health stuff. Like, it's not a matter of if this child is experiencing trauma, but when is this child going to experience trauma? Because we all know that there are traumatic things that happen. Now, if you look up that ACEs study, that's only 10 things. That is not a comprehensive list of adverse childhood experiences. For starters, COVID's not on that list. That was a very traumatic experience for a lot of kids. They don't.
Because 1 week you're playing with your friends, and then the next 6-8 months you only have access to.
And then think of babies that were born during that time. Like, they didn't know people without masks for the first year and a half to 2 years of their life. Like, that was normal. But now, like, that could be very traumatic for a kid to not understand, like, those types of things. Or even like, I even think of like my niece, like her whole kindergarten year was virtual. Like, that makes a long lasting impact on people. We have kids that sit in our classrooms who have lost parents. And this past Sunday, we were sitting there and we were talking about how Jesus is the only thing that can satisfy us. The only thing that can satisfy us. And I had a piece of bread and I was pulling the inside of that bread out, and I was telling kids, I was like, picked up my cup and I said, you see how my cup won't fit back in this bread? It's because it's not supposed to fit. My phone won't fit in there. A video game won't fit in there. The only thing that's going to fill that hole and satisfy us is Jesus. That's it. That is the only thing. And I asked one of the kids, I said, how do we know that Jesus cares for us? And the little girl said, he helps us when hard things happen and when bad things happen. And I said, you're right. He does. And out of nowhere, I have a kindergartner sitting on the floor and he says, Jesus was there when my dad left my mom. And that was all he said. He didn't say anything else. He just said, well, in that moment, he didn't say anything else. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I said, but you're right. Jesus was there. And Jesus is there with you right now. And remember, he's the only thing that can ever satisfy you. And so I think that sometimes we get so caught up, and it's very, very easy to get caught up in our own hurt and our own whatever, that we forget that there are other people hurting. And there's like that old saying or whatever, hurt people sometimes. And I mean, it can happen and that's why I think it's so important that we are, one, aware of our own trauma, aware of our own triggers, aware of what makes us tick. But also we have to be aware of the kids that we work with. We have to be aware of the people within our ministry. Like, you know better than anyone else when someone in your ministry is off. Simple as that. I know better than anyone else in my ministry when someone is off. When a kid, I know when a kid is about to have a meltdown, because I can see that those things are about to happen. Like, I see the things. We're with them every week. And so we see those things.
What are some, how do I question this? If something like a really terrible reaction or outburst, or what are some ways that maybe adults can help approach this situation to maybe just begin to kind of get a grasp and to help de-escalate? Because it seems like it's almost just like a switch sometimes, where
it can be,
there's like a trigger or something that just reminds them of this event. Or what are some ways that as adults that we can approach a situation with a kid who's having one of these situations? Because I know just by being a father that matching intensity is not a good way to do that.
No. And so I used to teach a training I used to teach the ACEs training, the Adverse Childhood Experiences training.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we always talked about in that training was don't take behavior personally.
Yeah.
It is that child's way of coping or that child's way of whatever. And I am not the best at that sometimes.
Well, no, because because we want to fix things.
Yes.
We are fixers.
Yes.
We see an issue, we fix it. I mean,
Yes.
that's just what we do week in and week out in all areas of
Yeah.
ministry. So if like there's a broken piece of equipment, we just want to fix it. If there's something else that goes wrong, we want to fix it. And so we're just even as humans, we are designed to be fixers.
Yeah.
That's just our natural thing. And so whenever someone is lashing out, it is very easy to take it personally because we want to try to fix the situation. And the more that we try to fix it, it seems
sometimes
like
it can get worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give you an example of something similar to that. First of all, the first thing I would tell you is, and I have said this to numerous people before, for starters, let me also preface this. I know I'm not a parent. Okay. I don't have to be a parent though. Because I have parented a lot of children over the last 15 plus years of my life. And I have had to get very creative in the ways in which that I interact with kids.
Yeah.
So I would say first and foremost is ask open-ended questions in those situations. You do not want to get to a point where you're just asking a kid a yes or a no question, because that's all you're going to get is yes or no. So in those moments, if you can ask open-ended questions, do so. If you
Such
yourself,
as like, tell me what you're feeling.
more so of like, hey,
I'm trying to guess.
Yeah.
I'm
So
reaching,
like, so like, what's going on, my friend? Like, you know, I will say too, and it's always easier to get down on somebody else's level.
Yeah.
Like it's always easier for me to get down on a kid's level than for me to stand over top of them and say something, because if I'm standing up and they're sitting down, it looks like I am bigger and they are littler, and that whole power dynamic just doesn't work either. And so getting on their level is a big thing. And letting them know that you're not a threat. Like, you're not a threat. I have said to kids before, even when I worked at the shelter, I'm like, listen, I'm not here to argue with you. I just want to know what happened. That's all I want to know. I want to know what happened.
Yeah.
And that's normally a lot of times where I'll start is what happened. Like, tell me what happened. And sometimes they'll tell me and sometimes they won't. But it's a matter of just letting them do that. Allow for silence. Silence will eventually break. And that is something that has taken a lot of time for me to understand as when it comes to those situations, but allow for that silence. Because one, if I'm sitting here and asking you 1,000 questions and you're already up here and you can't regulate your brain to get back down to where it's like this and not like this, then I'm just making it worse.
Yeah.
So I have to allow for silence also. So those would be 3 key things first and foremost. But asking those open-ended questions is key. Like, hey, what's going on? Can you tell me like what's happening? Keep it simple. Like, you know, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. Why do you think you're feeling that way right now? There's something called motivational interviewing, and it's basically justifying what's taking place.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that you don't feel good. I'm so sorry that you're not feeling good. I'm sure that does make it hard for you to try to control your emotions. Can you tell me what it is that's making you not feel good? So it's almost reiterating the fact that like this kid has just said that they hate everything and they don't like anybody, or this adult has just said that like they've gone through all of these things and it's hard. And you're like, oh, come on, it can't be that hard. I'm like, no, it is hard. You don't know what it's like for them to go through that. So justify like, you know what? You're right. I bet that is hard. I can't imagine what that feels like to go through that. I can't. I don't know. I'm not you. I don't know what that feels like. So those are some like little things, but like, so example of that was we did have a situation that took place at camp this summer where I was, again, very, very thankful that I had the training that I have had over the last 10 years to do social work, because a lot of that was put into place.
Yeah.
But there is a time and a place where we may have to take a step back. We had the situation take place at camp. The child took off outside, didn't want to speak to anybody. And it was me and another adult out there. The other adult was asking questions and finally looked at me and was like, I don't know what to do. I was like, just go back inside. It's fine. I'll just sit here. And so I literally sat outside for probably 20 minutes. That kid was so mad, screaming, yelling, whatever else, looking at butterflies, turning his back on me. Every now and then I'd ask him a question and he'd, don't talk to me. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I was just checking. And then after about 10, 15 more minutes, I would randomly say, man, I left my Dr. Pepper inside. And that's exactly what I said to him too. I said, man, I left my Dr. Pepper inside. And he was like, and he kind of turned around and looked at me. And I said, do you like Dr. Pepper? And he just kind of like gave me this glare.
Yeah.
And then he took off and he was mad. He was mad again. And that's okay. But what's funny is he had calmed himself down enough up until that point that he knew I had asked him about Dr. Pepper, because later on he came back to me and said, I do like Dr. Pepper, by the way.
Yeah.
So he did hear me. But I had to allow that silence. I had to allow him to process that in his own way. But then I also ended up having to step in, and I ended up having to raise my voice, because there are times where, you know, and one of the big things is if you become a danger to yourself or to others, I'm going to have to step in.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have to tell that child that. I said, hey, when you start to hurt yourself, that is when I step in. First and foremost, I am a social worker, and my job is to keep you safe.
Yep.
That's it. End of the story. And when I said that, he just kind of looked at me, and I was like, I'm dead serious. And he knew I was serious, and I didn't have to worry about that in that moment anymore. So I think stating those expectations is good too, but also knowing that, like, it's okay if you don't say the right thing.
Yeah.
Allow for silence. Kids are going to talk. He ended up, after a while, he had finally had so much like pent up anger and frustration. He just let it all out. We
Yeah.
heard everything that was going on in his little head that day.
Yeah.
Everything. Things that we didn't like, that wasn't even the whole purpose that set him off. Something else set him off. But the time we were done, we heard about things that were taking place at home and everywhere else, all because he had a safe place and he felt safe and he felt seen in that moment.
Yeah.
And he knew he could share openly. But it didn't come without him saying things. It didn't come without, you know, I hate yous, or I'm going to kill yous, or whatever. And that's okay. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I hope that that's not how you really feel. And he, you know, by the time camp was over, gave me a big hug, told me he loved me. And, you know, we check on him often, but like, it's just those things where that's like a worst case scenario for what we see, or what has happened. But I mean, even just the kid that comes in on Sunday mornings who has had severe anxiety, even just to get to church. Yeah. Like acknowledging those things and letting them know that they're not the only ones with anxiety. Like they're not the only ones that deal with that. They're not the only ones that have ADHD or whatever. I mean, in our society, the mental health statistics for kids ages 3 to 17, this is from 2016 to 2019. I don't have post-COVID numbers because I do know that this has gone up, but I do not have post-COVID numbers. Yeah.
But, and it takes a while for those to come out because they're still finalizing all kinds
ADHD,
of stuff.
ages 3 to 17, there are 6 million kids with ADHD. Over 5.8 million with anxiety, 5.5 with behavior problems, and 2.7 with depression. And that's not, I mean, that training that I went to there in Nashville a couple weeks ago, they said if you were to look around your room, their statistics show, if you were to look around your room and you had a small group of 8 kids, statistics show that 2 of those 8 kids have experienced some type of abuse within their home. 1 of those 8 have experienced emotional abuse. 2 of those 8 have experienced sexual abuse. 2 of those 8 have experienced divorce. 1 has experienced domestic violence. 2 have some type of mental health issue or crises that have happened. 2 have a family member experiencing substance use disorder. 1 has experienced some type of emotional neglect, and 5 of 8 have had some type of traumatic event before high school. 5. And on a small group for us is about 12 to 15 kids on a Sunday morning. Yeah. So double that as we're sitting there. In a group of 16 kids, we have 10 of those 16 that have probably will experience a traumatic event by the time they're in high school. And traumatic for me could be different, like I said, for traumatic for you. I mean, all of our kids have experienced COVID, and that is a very traumatic thing for them. Yeah. They don't know. You're
talking about life-changing moments.
Yeah. Natural disasters are big ones. Loss of parents. Some of these things that people don't even think of. A loss of a pet. Yeah. That is traumatic on kids. Oh, yeah. Do you know how many times that when we take prayer requests that we get like, and I don't mean that in a funny way. Like, I'm not trying to laugh, but like, that's what they care about. Yeah. Like, I prayed for 3 or 4 weeks for somebody's guinea pig a couple years ago. Yeah. Like, because that guinea pig was part of her family. Like, and then poor guinea pig didn't make it.
Yeah.
And she was devastated. But it's crazy to think that those are like, that there are just so many things that we just don't understand. Car accidents.
Yeah.
Like,
And nobody has to get injured.
No.
It's just a very violent situation that happens, you know?
yeah. We went to a cheer competition on Saturday, and there was a medical emergency that took place at that cheer competition. You cannot tell me that the kids that were standing around were not impacted by that medical emergency. A lady was having a seizure, and she, like, I mean, it was nothing that was, I mean, she was fine by the time it was all said and done, but you can't tell me that did not impact kids that saw that happen.
No, I remember very vividly the first time I saw two people get in a fist fight.
Yeah.
And it was at a church kids camp, which is really weird.
Be getting wild at camp, man.
Yeah, but it's something that I will never forget.
Yeah.
But like you said, like whenever you mention the death of a pet, it's like my poor daughter. We lost a dog earlier this year, very unexpectedly, and she is the one that talks about Dixie the most. She's the one that's always, hey, because we have like a little after they put her through the euthanasia process or whatever they call it, euthanizing her.
Yeah.
they took a paw print of her foot in like this silicone or whatever, and so we have it in like a little box, just something to help us cope with. I don't know. They asked us if we wanted it, and not thinking clearly, we were just like, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, just whatever. But anyways, she always, like, at least once a week, Ryan's always asking, hey, can I see Dixie's paw? Yep. Can I see Dixie's paw print? And I said, you know, when I talked to her, I'm like, yeah, you know, just try to talk through her, you know, through those things, and try to help her work through that situation in her mind. But I mean, I know for her, that was probably the most traumatic event that has ever happened in her little short life. You know, she's only 8.
Yep.
But yeah, it's crazy.
Well, and I think in those things too is understanding that, like, grieving is a process. Kids are not going to grieve the way that we always think they're going to grieve. They could be fine now, and then 5 months from now be like, Dixie's gone. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those, like, crazy things because they don't fully understand it. They're still trying to figure out their emotions. They're still trying to figure out those types of things. Like, there wasn't a playbook when we were kids on how to feel, on how to process things. I remember I was in the 3rd grade, and it was Thanksgiving. This was probably the first major traumatic event that I have ever experienced in my entire life. And this is how much it has still impacted me today. But I was in 3rd grade. It was 1993. We lived on Dutch Road here in Charleston. My mom was the daycare director at the church that we attended. And we had a really close family friend whose family owned a body shop on the west side of Charleston. And Ashley and Jackie it was the day after Thanksgiving, sorry. The daycare was closed that day, and because it's Black Friday, and it's a holiday. And so we get a phone call early morning. It's probably, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what time it is. Probably 8:30, 9 o'clock. We get a phone call. And Jackie and Ashley have been attacked on the west side by, Jackie's ex-husband, estranged husband. And Jackie and Ashley are being rushed to the hospital. Ashley this is a kid that I grew up with every single day for years. Yeah. She was in our home all the time. Like, we were best of friends growing up, like best of friends. Our families were extremely close. I mean, my mom had her cousins in the day. I mean, everybody was there. Yeah. And so here we are in 3rd grade. Ashley was Scott's age. Maybe I was 4th grade and they were 1st grade. But she and Scott were the same age. And so, I just remember getting the phone call that this has just happened, and Jackie's sister had called and told mom what had just taken place, and that she needed a place to bring her kids because they didn't know if he was coming back to, like, get more people. And so we end up packing, we get all these kids, they come to our house, and then he knew where we lived, so we couldn't stay there. So we go to my grandma's house, who lives in Cross Lanes. And so here's my grandma's day after Thanksgiving. It's me and my brother and all of our friends, and they don't even know if their cousin's going to make it. Yeah. And thankfully Ashley made it. Jackie did not. But And as in 93, 94, as a third, fourth grader, that's my first traumatic experience that I remember.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. Who would have ever thought that someone would tell me that I would be visiting one of my very best friends in the hospital as she shows me her scar on her arm that looked like a football? I still to this day remember walking into General downtown and them taking us back to see her for the first time and her showing us her arm because they had been stabbed. And the scar on her arm. And I remember her saying, "See, look, I look like a football."
Man.
That was 20 some years old. That was probably more than 20. It was probably like 30 years ago.
It just
That's how old
reiterates.
I am. I don't do math, y'all. Remember? I was really just trying to make myself feel young. Okay.
But it just reiterates the prayer that so many Christ followers have. We always want to be emanating or imitating Jesus. We also want to be emanating him as well. But and what Jesus did is he met people in their need.
Yeah.
He didn't go out of his way and do big fanfare. He never got in somebody's face and was just like, "Hey, you need to calm down." He was just like, "Look, I see you. I see what you're going through.
Yeah.
I want to meet you in your need." And it was just, we need to constantly just have that prayer, because it's so easy just to go out and when we can quote unquote be the hands and feet of Jesus, which is super important.
Right.
Let's bring these items for this event. Let's donate to this. The youth are doing, a fundraiser or whatever. And those are super important. But it's just in every single area of our life, we have to be Jesus. We have to be Jesus to the people who are hurting.
Yeah.
We have to be Jesus to the people that we will never see and come in contact with if we are meal packing. We have to do everything in our lives, the way that we handle our relationships, the way that we handle our ministry, the way that we volunteer in ministry. Every single aspect of our life needs to be surrounded by Jesus. We need to pray about it. We need to seek him in everything that we do. And it's not whenever we begin to make this lifestyle change, whenever we allow Jesus to show up in these areas of our lives, then we understand that the Holy Spirit is with us because he's given us wisdom on how to navigate these conversations with kids with very traumatic events in their life. We know how to approach them the way that Jesus would. We are reminded of those things because, like I said earlier, if I try to do it on my own terms, like, I'm going to match someone's energy.
Oh, for sure.
Very fast, very quickly. And I'm going to do 99.9% out of every single instant. I'm going to do more harm than good.
Well, let me tell you so at camp, my initial reaction was not great. I'll just be honest.
That's what I'm saying.
Like my initial reaction when I walked over to take care of the situation for the very first time, I was greeted with some very, very nasty expletives. And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "Who do you think you're talking to?" And then I literally in that moment had to check my own self because I was like, "Jessica, shut up. Jessica, shut up. Jessica, shut up. Jessica, shut up."
It wasn't that's not you checking yourself.
It was Jesus checking me because
that's Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So,
but it was instant because I was like, "Oh, who does this kid think they are talking to?"
Yeah.
And then I was like, it's in my mind. I'm like, "Jessica," I'm talking to myself this entire time. I'm like, "Jessica, just breathe. It's fine. He's mad. There's no need for you to get even more mad. You know what to do. Just let him go. He's not mad at you. He's mad at everything else. Just leave it be."
Yeah.
And I did. And I told him afterwards, I said, "I'm sorry I yelled at you earlier. I had to do that last week. I told Megan, I watched Landon and Livy for Megan last week. I was killing the ant game last week. Made them both cry. And I was like, I had to apologize. And I don't like to apologize. And so I was like, "I'm really sorry." And by the time it's said and done, Landon and I are both sitting in the front seat of my car crying.
Yeah.
But it's like, you have to be able to acknowledge the fact that when you do mess up, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to get it right 100% of the time. We're just not. There are times where we're going to not get it right, and that's okay. But we have to be willing to at least try.
Yeah. It's good stuff. All right. Thank you for enlightening us, educating us, making us aware of how we can better minister to individuals and kids specifically, just whenever they do have these moments where just something is just out of the ordinary with the way that they're acting. And
Just be a safe space.
Yep.
We all had, I'm sure if you were to go back and look, you had a safe space somewhere or a safe person somewhere in your life that made an impact on you.
Yeah.
Whether it be a coach, whether it be a Sunday school teacher, whether it be a parent. I had those people. I still to this day have those people in my life. I think of Barbara Keys. I think of Miss Christo. I think of Miss Bays. I think of so many other people in my life, Robin McFarland and my grandma, my parents. Like, I know that not everybody has parents that they can say are a safe place, but I did. Like, Scott and I did have that. And so does that mean that we always went to them when bad things happened? No. But I will never forget going to my grandma the day that someone from her church dragged me down the hallway trying to tell me I had to go to class when I was a visitor. And I remember being safe, my grandma being a safe place for me to be able to go and tell her what took place.
Ooh, if that was my child, that
listen,
person.
My mom was not happy.
They needed to find their own safe space.
My mom was not happy. But I think that that's important to know is that you can be a safe place for a kid. You're probably making a difference that you don't even realize that you're making.
Yeah.
And that's going to go a long way because when they are feeling rough or they're feeling down, they can come to you. But you have to create those spaces and you have to be open and honest. Again, I'm picking on Cheryl because she's sitting here. But one of the things I love that Cheryl and I have talked about is that she does create those spaces for her kids to come to her and to talk to her openly. And I think that that's important because there are people that will go through their whole life and not be able to trust anyone because they don't know who they can trust. And so you've got to be a caring adult or a trusting adult because that can take a kid from surviving to thriving. Reliable and consistent adults take a kid from just surviving in a relationship or in an environment to actually thriving in that. And we don't want to just survive. We want our kids to thrive, just like our parents and our families wanted us to do the same thing.
Yep. Good stuff. Thank you for today. I've enjoyed it. All right. Our mystery meat question of the day. What is the most amount of hours you have slept in a day?
In a day?
Yeah.
I don't know, but a couple weeks ago I slept for 14 hours.
I got you beat.
When I got back from Tennessee, I literally went home that night. I worked Monday, and I got home. I went to bed at I don't even know what time and woke up 5 minutes before my alarm went off.
Yeah.
It was the most glorious thing in the world, and I felt very rested.
I went on a missions trip between my junior and senior year in high school. We went to India, and we flew into this one city, and we had a 24-hour train ride all the way down on this rickety old train. Like, it was pretty bad. Like, the restrooms were just a hole cut out of the floor. And you just did your business on the tracks. But we were there for like 10 or 12 days, and it was exhausting. And so we had to get in the train to go back to the city so we could fly out. And I slept 24 hours. I slept every single minute of that train ride. Now, I will be honest, I took some Benadryl. And
it happens.
Yeah, but I slept for 24 hours, and I'm pretty sure I had maybe a day or two like that whenever I was.
Listen, there is no tired like a mission trip tired. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah,
you're exhausted afterwards. It took me days to recover after New York this time.
Yeah.
My goodness. I don't know if I'm fully recovered. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm recovering just to go on another one in 40 days, something like that.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, thank you so much. Once again, I enjoyed this. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next Friday for another episode here on The Potluck. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. You can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.